So today's video is going to be on Vernier calipers and how to read them. They do come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. This is one type of Vernier caliper. This is a dial gauge Vernier caliper. We have a digital caliper, which is, in this instance, this is a longer one. You can see it's got quite a big range on it. And these are a fairly simple premise. You can turn them on or off. You make sure when they are closed that you have hit the 0 button so that your reading is 0. And then as you move the body, it gives you a reading and a measurement of the points between the tips of the jaws. That distance is also the distance of the internal jaws there. And at the end of the tool, there's also a plunger that is exposed at the same distance there, 20.18mm. So as I move the tool in and out, that plunger moves in and out. And that can be quite handy for judging the depth of holes and things like that. Again, digital calipers are good. We're going to talk about the manual type today, dial caliper that I first showed you. These tools are good, but you shouldn't really rely upon them too much until you understand how to read the manual calipers themselves. These are considered a bit of a cheat. They do work, and they are good depending upon what your tolerance is. They're absolutely fine. But again, don't try to use one of these instead of learning how to read the real thing. So, our actual dial caliper. Again, the construction is similar to the digital one that we looked at first, where as we move the tool out, we'll see that we have the external jaws here open up, so do the internal jaws, and the plunger on the end of the tool. This is a metric gauge, so we're measuring in metric, as we're used to. And as we move the tool out, we'll see the dial spins round. But the first thing that we need to ensure before we use a Vernier caliper is that we open it up a little bit and make sure that the jaws inside here are clean and there's nothing on them. Make sure they're nice clean surfaces, there's no nicks or damage to them. And then we're going to close them up. And what we want to make sure of is at this point that the gauge is 0. So when it's clamped up, we want to make sure, especially on the dial gauge, I can simply undo the little grub screw at the bottom here, and this will allow me to rotate the gauge. Whilst the gauges are clamped firmly on 0, I'm going to adjust that gauge so that the needle points at 0. So that's not right, that's not right. If I put it on 0 firmly whilst the blades are clamped together and then redo our grub screw, I can ensure I'm going to get an accurate measurement. Now, the screw on top clamps the moving part of the body down to the tool. So if that clamp is tight, I cannot move the tool. So ensure that that clamp is loose, and you can then drive your Vernier caliper open and close as you need to. It's also handy if you clamp something, you can then tighten the top clamp to read your measurement, because you know that that body is not going to move on the tool. If we take a known size, so an 8.5mm drill bit for example, I know I can open my gauge up. We can see that we're starting to get a reading there. Now, on the dial gauge, let me clamp. We are reading 0.44mm. Each notch, each increment around this gauge is 0.02 of a millimeter. So, 0.4 plus 0.02 plus 0.02, it's 0.44. And on our gauge at the bottom here, we can see we've exposed 5 to the half mark, 6, 7, 8mm. So it is 8mm plus 0.44. So 8.44 is the size that this has given us for the shank of our drill, which is an 8.5 drill. So that's fairly accurate. That's how simple it is to read a dial caliper. The dial starts on 0, and every half turn is 1mm. Remember, it is an increment of 0.2, so each mark is plus 0.2mm. Remember, you can measure the internal diameter of things using these jaws. So if I wanted to measure that hole, I could put them jaws inside the hole and open it up to get a measurement. I could also use the depth gauge to get a measurement on how deep a hole is. So if I was to place that on there, I could extend the tool out so I have a small portion showing. I can then read my measurement up here to see exactly how much my plunger is extruding. So that's Vernier caliper in a nutshell. They are very accurate tools for measuring, and they should be trusted a lot more than you would a rule.